Hello everyone and welcome to the 11th tutorial. I know it's been a while since my last one. To be honest, I've just been playing a lot of video games and just getting distracted. And I was feeling a little burnt out with Designer, even though I've still been working on materials for the channel and stuff. But I've been working on so many that I wasn't finishing any of them. So this is the one that I finished up, and let's get into it. So you can see here a render in Marmoset Toolbag 4. I just want to go over some of the key things about this material that I learned a lot from. So we've done a wooden material in this channel before, a simple one. This one's a little bit more complicated. Not so much because of like the finished result, but some of the inner workings to make it possible. So the first thing that gave me the most trouble with this one was actually the wood grains. If you notice, the wood grains alternate. Some go this way or they follow the long or the on the long side of the plank, and they alternate, um, as well as these inner ones here. So that was the biggest challenge, getting the mask for it, and obviously we'll go over that. So that was a bit of a challenge that I was able to figure out, um, but not so much just getting them to alternate direction. It was mostly like you could see like a little bit. It was hard, and this is just because it's a 2K texture, but managing the mask to blend at the right spot. And because typically when I work with bevels like this, it's very easy when you bevel from the bounds of the white island in your pattern. Normally when I bevel inward, so the bounds are still like a clear definition, or clearly defined. But with when you bevel outward and then you have two pieces or two like white islands, right, that bevel outward and they meet, now you're going outside of the original bounds of the island, the white island, or the pattern, and that's when you have to like kind of create a separate um, way to get the new bounds, because they're mixing in a specific spot. And then if you start warping the bounds, like if like for example in some of these spots like the wood, like over here, there's some like what's it called? Edge slope warping going on here, or edge blur. I can't remember the name right now, but the one we use all the time. So like it's not just like a straight line where the bevels meet. There is some curving in there. So that was like one of the biggest challenges, with the wood grains, since these are alternating. Um, I think that's like the main thing about this one. We have some nails and some plates. Um, yeah. So this is actually a recreation of a texture in the game World of Warcraft. There's a dungeon in there called SFK, or Shadowfang Keep, and since that was my childhood, I like recreating textures from games. If you guys have any suggestions, or you think there's a cool texture from an old game that you'd like to see, that'd be a good opportunity for me. But yeah, so you see the planks here. It's got the screws or the nails, and then like the plate or the hole in the center, and that. But anyways, enough of that yapping. Let's get into the graph. Okay, so here you can see the entire graph. We're gonna keep doing. No one's complained about this new method yet, so if you don't like it, let me know. But I'm gonna disable all the height, and we are going to enable it, and I'm just gonna talk you guys through what's happening. So I'm gonna pause and disable. Okay, so this one is a bit of a weird start, and there's probably a better way to do it, but this is the way my brain works. Alright, so I'm going to start by just showing you the end result of this first section, which is the pattern. So this is what we're trying to get to. So we just have our black and white mask for our pattern. So that's the end goal. So the way I did and the reason why it's weird is because I was trying to separate, based on the wood grain direction and the inner wood planks, I guess the square ones versus the rectangular ones. All right, so we'll start with the long rectangular ones. So we start with a shape here, and then I use an edge detect to get my curved edge corners. Multiply to get rid of the white, pretty standard. Then I use a transform 2D to move it to the top left, and you can see my values here. So I move it to the top left. Actually, I don't need this one. Why do I have this? Yeah, I'm gonna disable it because I don't need it. Actually, I'm just gonna delete it. Actually, let me let me just check it. Yeah, this is just doing nothing. Okay. So then from that transform 2D, I should have done it from this guy, but it doesn't really matter. So then I go from this guy and I move I move another one to the bottom right. Then I do it again and I put it on this side here. And you can use these guys up here. I guess I'm just rotating it, I think. Oh, that's why I did it from this guy, because this guy's like already centered. So then if I were to do that's actually really smart of old me. This is actually a very old material. So because the pivot's in the center, I can just rotate and it's going to be in the spots for me that I need them to be. Ah, very good, old me. Okay, so I did that. I rotate them 90 degrees, 90 degrees, 90 degrees, and then I added them. So then so this is where it starts to matter which ones I add together. So I'm adding these ones going left to right or horizontal, and then these are the vertical ones because I'm already starting to think about which way is my wood grain going to run. So then I need 4 of them. So I used the tile sampler and I did a 2x2. Obviously pattern input 1, and I think everything pretty much stays the same using the scale of 1. No offset, nothing weird. Yep, everything is pretty much the same. So I did the same thing for the bottom one, 2x2. And then we're going to pause there for that. So that's the end of the initial pattern for the long planks. Then we're going to move on to the squares. So for this, I started with a normal shape, except I made it a scale of 99.99. Everything else stays the same. Use the tile sampler. Now, like I said, this is an old material, so when I went back, I had to clean up a lot of it. But this is the way that I did it back then, and then I cleaned it up a little bit, but I didn't rethink this entire section here. So I think there's definitely a better way to do this, but this is how I did it. Okay, so tile sampler, 4x4, because what I'm trying to do is I'm creating a total of 4x4 squares, and then I'm excluding all the ones that are outside the inner box. So I'm creating 16, and I'm only using wait, would that be 16? 4 times 4, yeah, 16, and I'm only using the inside 4. Yeah, that makes sense. Okay, yeah. Yeah, I'm using these guys. So you can see here that 4x4, and I'm using I'm using pattern input number 2 because I want to do the alternating effect, or the checkered effect, right, where it's white, black, white, black, white, blah, 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 etc. So you're kind of like tricking it because something is supposed to go here, but because there's nothing plugged in into the second input, then it thinks there's nothing, so that's why it's empty. So I do that for both of these, except for the second one, the bottom one here, I plug the shape into the input 2 and leave input 1 blank, instead of this one where input 1 is filled but 2 is empty, just to get the inverse, or the opposite, I guess. You can see here. So then from the tile sampler, oh, I don't like this. Why did I do this? Okay, hold on. Hold on. Okay, this should be changed to, because what I did here is I don't like leaving, I don't know if it's like okay practice or not to leave foreground or background empty. I know it's okay to, obviously, you don't always need opacity, but I'm not sure if it's okay to do this. This is how I would try to do my masking when I was like a noob back then. So I think it would be better to just subtract. So move that up there, do that, and then do subtract. That'll give me the same result instead of having this empty one. Again, I'm not really sure, but I think it's bad practice, like something you don't want to do, because there's a better way. There's the proper way to do it. So again, subtract that there. Boom. Okay, so this is what I should have done. Okay, so here we have a shape, 0.5 in scale. Everything else is pretty much the same. And then I invert it to create, the outside box for the inner box. And then like we just did, I subtract it. So now we have alternating inner planks. And then I did an edge detect for both of them. Edge width 3 and roundness 4 to get our curved corners. And then I multiply to get rid of the stuff we don't need. And then I have alternating, curved corners. Feed that into a tile sampler. Again, we're matching this top one, at least with the amount on the X and the Y, so 2 by 2. Everything else should stay the same. Scale 1, size 1, 1. Yeah, everything else should be the same. I think we can change. I don't know if it'll break stuff, but this, because when I'm working with like initial masks, I don't like to have gradients like this, so I should probably, let's try. If something breaks, yeah, we'll change it back. But especially when you're working with flood fills and stuff, you don't want this to nearest. They would probably do that for these guys too, because yeah, we got some. Okay. All right. So now we should have our long planks and our square planks, and then we gotta start adding them. So if we look at here, so we have our long guys, so the grain is going in this direction, and then these guys are also going in the same direction, so I add those together. So I group these together, and then these two together, and then these two together, because the direction of the grain is going the same way. So we need to do that here. So starting from the top, I add this top one, plug it into the top, into an add linear dodge, and then I'm just going to highlight it so we can see which one it goes into. So it's going into the third one. And then here we have another add linear dodge, and then we're adding the other one. So we're adding number 2. Just going to name these for you guys. I'm going to call this one 1. All right, so I've numbered these for you guys so they're easier to follow. So we have here an add linear dodge, and in here we're adding together, let me highlight these, 1 and 3, and then for the bottom one we're going to add the remaining, which are going to be 2 and 4 together. So they're both add linear dodge. Then we have a purlin noise here because we're going to do some warping. Scale of 8, nothing fancy, purlin noise, and then we have a multi-directional. warp grayscale, intensity of 10. Everything's pretty much the same except for the mode. Change that to min. And then I do the same thing for both of these. Actually, I should probably change the direction for one of these so that they're not the same. So I'm just going to do this one's at 0 and this one's at 180, so they're opposite directions. Okay. Now here I have a add linear dodge. So I'm basically adding these two together. And then this is a temporary mask because I'm just using this to create cutouts. So if we look here, we have these cutouts here. It's kind of like they're worn or broken or, just old. So from that mask that we just created, I'm doing a histogram scan to make sure that I don't get any of this stuff here that I'm getting. So I use a scan to get rid of all gradients on the edges, flood fill, and then I use a flood fill to gradient, angle variation 0.75, into a scan with a position of 0.115. So then we get these cutouts, and then we use the cutouts here to subtract from the main, from the added masks. Once we subtract that, we use this new mask with the cutouts to subtract, or I guess multiply in this case because of the mask. So we multiplied to get rid of them. So now we're back to having individual masks, but now they have the cutouts in them. So these are both multiply by the same thing. And then here's where I do the beveling. So we have a distance of 0.04, corner type rounded, smoothing 0.75, and then make sure you're working with the proper normal format. So now we should have two of these that are beveled the same way. Same settings for both of these. And then we add them together with using a max lighten. So that here you can see our beveled planks touching and merging into each other nicely. Now, this is the important part, because now we have to create a mask. We have to go back to this, but with the bevels in it. This is what I struggled with the most. So the way I came up with the solution, there's probably a better one, but we have the version of both bevels added together, go into the background here of a subtract blend mode, and then I subtract the beveled version from the joint version to get this. Now I just want to show you guys a little test here. The reason why this method is better is because if originally I was thinking, okay, why am I taking both these bevels, adding them together, and then subtracting one of them again? Why don't I just, if I'm subtracting it from the added together, why don't I just, because if I take this and I subtract this, then I should be left with this black area here, right? And that is what I'm left with. So if I'm left with this black, why don't I just take this mask? And you can see the difference between these two right here. Look at where they meet. They're not the same, right? So one of them is obviously going to be better than the other. So if you're thinking, okay, why don't I just use this one? Well, okay, if we take this one and then we histogram scan it, because we don't want a gradient, and then I compare both of the scans using a copy set to 0.5, this gray area is the difference. So like I said, one of these masks is going to work better than the other, and this method worked the best for me. And we'll see why in a second. But yeah, I max lightened both beveled versions together, and then from the result, I subtracted this upper bevel, and you see it gives me this. And then I do the same thing down here. I subtract this bevel from this guy. So the bevel goes on top, and then this guy goes in the middle here. Both of these are set to subtract. Both of them scan afterwards. Set to position 1, contrast 0. And then we get this, which is the inverse of each other. Now this part, there's probably a better way to do this, but this is how I came up with it. So I took both of these scans, and then I threw them into a blend with copy set to 0.25. You're probably thinking, still pick one. Why would you do this? So I did this so that I can have, because if I just leave this at 1, right, it's going to give me the background, or if I go to 0, it's going to give me the foreground. If I do 0.25, or actually technically 0.5, 0.5 doesn't work because it gives me all gray. But if I do 0.25 or 0.75, because it'll give me the inverse of that, basically what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to get two different colors. I don't care in what spot in the gradient they're in. I just don't want one to be white, and I don't want the other one to be black, and I don't want both of them to be the same. So anywhere between 0.01 and 0.49 and 0.51 and 0.99. Anything between those two values will work. Obviously, the more in the middle of those two you are, the better. That's why we chose 0.25, because that's directly in between 0 and 0.5, and 0.75 is also directly between 0.5 and 1. Alright, hopefully that made sense. So the reason why I want them to be different colors is because now that enables me to use edge detect. Because if these are both, so I'm going to leave edge detect show in there, and I'm going to go with 0.5. So because they're both the same color, they're both gray, and they're touching, it's identifying them as one island, and it's giving me this. If I undo that, and let's say I do 0, I guess 0 does work. Okay, that's how it works. Okay, yeah, I guess 0, 1, or just not 0.5. Yeah, I guess they just need to be different colors. Okay, so forget everything I just said. It 0.5, just avoid 0.5, okay? I think even 0.49 will work because they're different colors, and the edge detect should notice that there's a difference. Okay, there you go. So we're just gonna go with 1, just to keep it nice and simple. Well, actually, I don't even need this blend then. I can just plug one of these in. Crap. Yeah, okay. See, we're learning together. I'm just gonna leave it like this, but yeah, technically this is all ready, so I would only really need one of these. So I could get rid of all of this and then just pull from that. But you know what? Let's do that. So I'm just gonna delete this guy, delete that guy, and then this should be coming from this. And then we'll grab all of this, like that. Okay, so we really only need one of these. And then we scan it, and then the edge detect picks up the difference between the black and the white. And then we get a thin line between all of them because it's an edge detect. And edge detect is set to 1, the lowest values possible, but we have to get rid of this black line here. So I use a distance node. Okay, if something breaks later on, it's because of this, and I'll have to come back and change it, but everything should still hold. Actually, hold on, let me just look at this again. Okay, I ran some quick simulations, some quick maths, did some quick hacks, and Yeah, we can actually undo that. Or keep what we did. So yeah, just undo. Oh no, that's too far. Okay, whatever. We'll just do this. Boom, boom. And then this in here like we did. This and this. Like that. Okay. Okay, sorry for the last change. Actually, what we're going to do is, instead of deleting these guys, we're going to delete these guys. So we're going to pull from this top scan into there. And the reason why I'm doing the top one instead is because if I leave everything as it is and I look at the end mask, it should be these guys that are white. But if I delete the top ones and I change to the bottom, watch this map here invert. So if I pull from this guy instead, it's going to invert, and that's going to throw off all my wood grains. So I'm going to pull from this guy so that my wood grain directions stay intact. And I'm going to delete these guys instead of the top ones. Okay, now we grab this, we move it over so it's nice and neat. Boom. Okay, alright. God, okay, let's continue. So then we take that scan from up here into an edge detect, right? So that it detects the difference between the two with a black line in between. Then we do a distance to push out the pixels to fill this gap. So you can see that there's a the pixels get moved out. Okay, I'm sorry, I was just doing some thinking. Yeah, so it's pushing these guys out and these guys out, and they're meeting in the middle. And that's how we get this. This is easier to see because I had the two grayscale values that were like different, right, at 0.25, and it was easier to visualize. But we're past that. Hopefully you guys understand that. If not, let me know in the comments. Okay, so then we have this, and then we do a scan just to get rid of any weirdness. But this one's set to position 0.5 and contrast set to 1. And then from this guy, we have an invert grayscale because we will need the opposite. So one of these is going to be for the grains going in this direction, and then the other one for, whatever this direction is. Okay. So now that we have this, we finished with this. Now here I have an auto levels that does nothing, but it looks nice. I think I did need it before, but not anymore. All right, so we're calling this auto levels pattern. Uh, so now let's go to our flood fill area here. So from the pattern or the auto levels here, we are going to go down and do a normal node, intensity of 10. Make sure your normal formats are the same. And then I'm going to use the curvature Sobel node because this node amplifies the crevices, or I guess it highlights the convexity versus the concavity. So this is pointing outward, this is pointing inward. So what's pointing out is going to be white, and what's pointing in is going to be, or concave. No, sorry. This is concave, I think. Yes, the black is concave, and the white is convex. Right, so if it's pointing out, it's white. If it's pointing in, it's black. Okay, that's all you need to know. Then after that, that's an intensity of 0.5. After the Sobel, we do a histogram scan, which allows us to get this. Then when we have this, we use this is a histogram set to 0.625. contrast set to 1. Then we take this and we do a flood fill. And you can see that these are all their own islands because of this scan, because of the curvature Sobel. And the reason why I landed on this value because you have to find like the sweet spot. Because here, these are not separated, so it's like this is one big island. So you need to have enough. You need to have at least one pixel in between. You cannot have any white pixels from one island to the other touching. So then you can see here, because of the flood fill, that it's working. If I turn this down or up, when it looks like this, it's because there's a pixel touching somewhere. So like right here, okay, like where is it? Oh, there it is. So for this specific case, 0.625 was the sweet spot to where everything gets its own island. Then from that flood fill, we go into a flood fill to random color and a flood fill to random grayscale. From the random color, we do a distance node set to 5000 as usual. And then the flood fill random color goes to the bottom. And then this original histogram scan goes into the top. For this distance node and this distance node, because we're also doing a distance node for the random grayscale. Then for the random grayscale distance node, we have an auto levels just for fun. And that's it for this flood fill stuff. And then just start a long road or connection for the flood fill to random color after the distance, because we're going to be using that a lot for our noises. So our noises don't carry over from one width plane to the other, as we've done many times. Okay, I'm going to get a drink real quick because that was a lot. Alright, I've noticed it's already been like 17.5 minutes. And that's not including the first part of the video that I messed up because I was muted. So we've barely gotten anywhere. It's been a lot of explaining. So if you guys want me to shut up, you gotta tell me in the comments. If you don't tell me in the comments and I'm yapping, I will not change my ways. Okay, so continuing from the pattern, we have a Perlin noise here. Then we use a vector warp grayscale to, break it up based on the planks. Then we use a slope blur grayscale. And then that goes into a subtract blend into the middle. And then we have another blend down here. Okay, I'm going to explain some more because this was something that was really bothering me. So actually, I'm going to enable this node. And you can see here, right now we're working on the edge wear. So you can see the edge warping here. So I'm going to turn it off and on. I'm going to disable this right here, this guy. And you're going to see an issue. So if we look closely, you might have this happen to your materials where you're trying to do where you're trying to use a vector warp grayscale to break up the noise. Because if I get rid of this, I think it should go away, right? But then like the slope blurring is running across the planks, so this way we don't have that. But it creates this weird like indentation thing going around all our planks. And I was like, okay, well I could blur it. And I think I did here, yeah. So if I get rid of this, it's even more noticeable, or it's harsher. So originally, I was like, okay, I can blur it. And it does fix it a little bit, right? But you still kind of see it. So a solution I found, typically I would just multiply out the black in between. But like I said, this time, normally I bevel outward, or inward, but this time we beveled outward. So because we beveled outward, we don't really have a dividing line, right? It's faint because it's mixing two sides. So the way I fixed this was I created this guy right here. And here I did a subtraction, and I subtracted to take this guy, so the bad guy, put him in the middle in the background, and then on top, you're putting your your main path, your main highway, so the pattern. That's going to go on top, so you're subtracting the main pattern from this guy, and it gives you this, which is an isolation of the bad guys. So now that I have the bad guys, I can do another subtract, where I just subtract the bad guys. I use the bad guys to subtract them from here, and then I get this, which is so much nicer, because now those guys are gone. I don't know how I came up with this. Sometimes I just plug things in into a blend mode, and I just go through all the blend modes, and then I invert these guys, and then I run through all of these. I just go down, blah, 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 until till I see something that's kind of leading in the direction, and then I go from there. Okay. So now we're able to get rid of those bad guys that we don't want, and then I probably don't need this blur. But I think I kept it because I was still getting a little bit there. You can see. It's not perfect. Actually, does this perfectly get rid of the bad guys? And this is just from this. Because in some of these spots, the difference between the two islands connecting, here is high, but like here is like a lower. And I think that's what we're seeing. So I just took a blur here. I should turn my quality up. A very, very 0.25, very low intensity blur. So it's not really changing. It's not smoothing, even though this blur is applying to everything. In this case, it's very low. I only need to blur a little tiny bit, so this is not very noticeable on the overall material, which is good. Because like if you had other details, it would blur those out too. So then that gives us edge wear here. So I did a copy of 0.20 or 0.6, and here I can choose how much of that warping I want to come through. So I just wanted a little bit. Okay. So from the edge wear, we're going to pull down and create a histogram scan. Set to 0.075, and we'll be using this later, but we'll just leave it here so we have it ready. And then we have a crystals 2 set to scale of 4. And then here I do a transform 2D to stretch it. So you can see here in one direction. So here you can see the values. And then I use a make it tile photo grayscale, because if we hit spacebar, you can see that the tiling has broken. And obviously we always want to make sure our tileness is not broken, at least in most cases. So then we use a make a tile photo grayscale. Here are the settings. So now this is seamless while still being stretched. And then we have a slow blur grayscale with another prelude noise set to min mode. And then from here, now this is the important part. This is where we apply the two masks that we made down here for the different directions for the grains, for the wood grains. So these are my initial wood grains, right? Running vertically, and then these ones are going horizontally. So I just use the transform 2D here, and I rotate it at 90 degrees. So now we have these guys going this way, and that guy going that way. And then I use the vector warp grayscale again, 2 of them, 1 for each one, so that we can break it up based on the planks. And then we're pulling from the vector map that we created down here. I'm sorry, I don't think I mentioned it, but yeah, that's whenever you see a vector warp grayscale, it's gonna be this guy. So that's gonna stretch along most of the graph. So that's gonna plug into both of these. So now you can see that we have our 2 directional wood grains. And then I have a multiply blend mode here. So then the wood grain goes into both of these. And then we have our masks, so we can multiply out the ones we don't want for each mask. So, and that's coming from these guys here from earlier. So have these guys continue because we'll be using these again. have them continue. And then the top one here, so this mask is going into the top one, so top with top, and then bottom with bottom. So then we have this. And then here, I add linear dodge them together to get this. So now you can see that we have both wood grain directions together. Then here I use a histogram scan to make it less flat because I don't want to subtract over everything. I just want to have like some specific areas. Then I blur it a little bit. And then here I multiply times this thing that we made earlier from the edgeware. Because if I don't have this, actually I need to bring these up before we get to the end. If I don't have this, so my blur is blurring from one plank to the other. So from like here, it's blurring both of them together, which typically you don't want to do, right? Because they're spilling over into each other, and these are separate planks. But I didn't want this wood grain noise to be here because it's typically like sanded or cut, and so the wood grains would only be on the flat side. So I used this guy here, this scan, and I multiplied it to get rid of anything in between for the most part. So you can see that we go from this to this. That way this noise is only on like the flat surface. Some of it's like spilling over here, but as it gets closer to where they meet, there's less of it. And you could play with this to get. So you can see over here that it's keeping the subtraction more on like the top surface. So you can see that the edges here are sinking when I turn it off, and then not sinking when I turn it back on, because now there's nothing here to subtract. Okay, moving on. Crystals 2, Perlin noise, directional warp, stretching, values. Again, make a tile, rotate it 90 degrees, 2 vector warp grayscales again, connect it to this guy. Same process, add them together. Now we should probably do max light for, not that one, for this one as well. Just in case there's any of them that touch, even though they probably shouldn't. Scan, same process, we're just getting more noise on top. We're multiplying again by that guy. Levels into a subtract. Actually, I don't think I showed this guy. So this is also a subtract set to 0.075. Another subtract to the same value. So then we're going from this to this. Then we have surface noise 3, so this is like got more noise on top. So now here we're using anisotropic noise, which gives us this thing. So then I blur it to make it chunkier. Then I have a Perlin noise, and I slope blur this guy, min, and then I scan it. Actually, I don't need this because this is default. This is giving me the same thing that's here. So I'm just gonna save all that. So same process, we rotate 90 degrees. We have 2 of them, vector warp, with that same orange path. Multiply out the masks. Again, remember top with top, bottom with bottom. So this is top, this is bottom. Max lighten them together. Subtract the, or multiply with this guy here into a levels. Actually, this level's default. 0.05 subtract. Okay, we're almost done with the hard stuff. Or actually, the easy stuff. Okay, then we have height variation. So this is where some are higher or lower than others. Pretty drastic because it's like a stylized texture, so I always like to play more with exaggerations. So for this guy, we're going to take from this auto levels that we created for the flood filter random grayscale here. This is the one and only time it's used. And that's going to feed into a blur, 0.5. And then it's going to go into our height. If I get rid of this blur, we get this. But with a blur, we make the transition a little smoother. But maybe you want this, in which case just don't have this blur. But I didn't want it to be that noticeable. Usually you want to prevent having hard edges like that, unless it's specific to the material. So I did a multiply of 0.35, because I didn't want to have all the strength, otherwise it'd look like that. And then I do a overall height adjustment. So I lower everything because I need to make room for things that are going to go on top of the wooden planks. So I just do an overall one, a levels, and I just lowered it all to 0.625. So then we go from that to that. Okay. Oh, sorry, I should have mentioned this in the beginning. We're working with height scale of 2.5 and tessellation factor of 6. I mean, your tessellation factor can be whatever you want, but the height scale, you should be working with 2.5. Otherwise, it's gonna look a little different for you. It might look flat like that. So make sure you go 2.5. All right, now we are doing this is the plate imprints. So you'll see why. Actually, I'll just put this guy in as well. So if I disable the imprints, the plate is going like directly on top, and we're getting some bleeding here of the plank going through the metal plate. But if I create the imprint, it kind of looks like when the plate was bolted down, right? Like it was cutting or cutting into the plank, which is a nice little detail. So that's what I mean by imprint. And that's why it looks a little weird. Okay. So you can have different, if you want to have a circular one or, whatever, you could do that. But let's go over this, how I did it. Okay. Actually, this should be at the bottom, but whatever. All right, we're gonna start over here because this is the main plate. So we're gonna start with a shape. I rotated it 45 degrees. You can see the difference here. Then I used a transform 2D to scale it down a bit. Here are the values. And the reason why I scaled it down is because I needed a smaller version. Also, this should be, it's easier to read. Okay, I fixed some things. Okay, so we have our shape. We have a bevel, 0.025. And then this is the guy we just talked about. So then the top beveled guy is going to go into a slight blur because I didn't want to have this harsh line here. So I blur it a little bit. And then for this transform guy, we're going to do a non-uniform blur grayscale, intensity of 1, and then make sure your samples and your blades are turned all the way up. That's your resolution, basically. And then I'm going to subtract this guy from this guy to create this guy. So it's kind of hard to tell. So I'm just going to jack this up so you can see it. But it's creating this thing. Now, if we look at the reference, or you can see here that kind of you can see the imprint here. So that's what we just did. So now after we have this, where we subtract, we can do we're going to do a tile generator. I'm so hungry. And it's nothing crazy, so we're using the tile generator and not the tile sampler, because the tile sampler is more expensive. But we're doing pattern or image input, going in there. Everything looks fine. Everything should be the same. The only big difference is the only main thing is it should be a 2x2 because we need 4 of them, right? Because we have 4 sets of these planks. I think everything. Oh, I do have a little bit of position random because I don't want them to be like perfectly centered, especially 4 of them to be perfectly centered. So there's like a little bit of variance on their position. And then I have a little bit of positional random, right? Because obviously they were imprinted a specific way, but it was manually done. So I would expect that it wasn't machine made because I don't think they would have that in World of Warcraft, or at least for that specific texture. And I do have a little bit of luminance random, so that some imprints are deeper than other. Again, just more variance. Oops. Always be careful when you want to scroll. You don't scroll near this, or you're gonna change your number. Yeah, and then everything else should be the same. Okay. So once we have that, we're gonna do a multi-directional warp, because now we want to break them up so that they're not all perfectly the same. So we want to warp some of them. So for that, we're going to do say Perlin noise. Actually, you know what, we're just going to leave it. Perlin noise, and then here we do a transform 2D, and then we scale it 4 times. So then we have this. Instead of increasing the scale, we're just going to do this because it's not going to be really that noticeable. Put that into the intensity input at the bottom here. And then once we have this done, this is going to feed into a add linear dodge. But we'll stop here because we have to cover this stuff now. So let's go over here, and then here we just have now for what we're doing here is this guy, the centerpiece here. Start with a shape. Then we have a transform 2D, again to make it smaller. We're taking this initial shape and blurring it by 0.25, very subtle. So then we have these two. Then I take the small one here and I blur it by 0.22. And then I do a subtract to create this ring. So I take the bigger blur, put it into the background. The little guy, the blurred little guy goes into the foreground, subtract fully to get this ring. Then I use a tile generator again, 2x2. Everything else should be the same. I don't really care for the for subtle rotation and stuff because it's gonna go warped here. Okay, so then once we have that tile generator, that's gonna be warped as well. This is really messy. Okay, so we have our warp set to 4, mode min 4 directions. So then you can see here that they're being warped a little bit. And then we're using the same parallel noise from before, except this one we are tiling, or we're increasing the tiling by 2. And then that's going down there. So then that's what's going to add into what we just did before. So add those two together. But do 0.05, because if you do 1, it's going to look like that, and we don't want that. So then once we have this, we're going to subtract this small blur. We're going to do the same thing with it. Do a tile generator again, 2, 2. Everything else should be the scale of 0.8. Let me check the scale on this guy. Yeah, this guy's 1. This guy's 1. But this guy is set to 0.8. And then everything else should be the same. So then we get our 4 points, and then we subtract those 4 points to create a hole in it. So now that we have this guy with our holes, we have our plate, we have like the middle ring, and then the hole. We can do a multiply, and we're going to take this power line noise, the same noise that we use for the multiply directional warp here for the rings. It's going to continue on, and then we're going to scale this one by 4 times. And then this, I could probably just use this guy again. But actually, no, this is tiling more. Okay. And then I'm going to multiply, because what I'm trying to do here is create these bumps. So we're going to take this guy and multiply it. Then, once we have this guy with the bumps, we're going to do a scan to get a mask. Position to 0.3. And then we're going to blur it 0.75. Make sure your quality's up. And then we're going to subtract. Okay, so let me try to cover that correctly. So after our multiply by 0.1, histogram scan 0.3, contrast all the way up to 1. We blur it a little bit, and then we're subtracting. And that's how we create this, and that's what this blurring is for. Otherwise, we get this. So we need to make sure we see it. Once we have our imprints, then we're going to add our plates. So before this stuff here, we're just going to pull from this guy, from the multiply. And that's going to go into a levels. And then that's going to go into a max lighten. And the levels here is going to dictate how high they are. So if we lower this, it'll go down. But remember, you can only go down so much because you're going to be hitting this. So you're really just worried about how high you want it to be. Obviously, you don't want this because people are going to be walking on this. They'll be tripping all over the place. So the sweet spot I found was 0.7. And remember, some of these planks are higher than others. So that's why you have to account for that, unless all the planks are sitting at the same height. Okay. Let me get a break real quick. Okay. So now that we have our plates, we're going to take a pause and we need to create this mask over here. Now this was a special kind of mask. And I'll explain when we get to it. But basically what we're going to do is from after the plates imprint, between the plates imprint and the plates, we are going to plug that into the background. And then we're going to subtract the levels guy here to get this. Then from here, I don't know why my cursor looks like this, but so from here we're going to do a histogram scan. Position to 1, and then we're going to invert it. Okay, I noticed something was off. I'm going to undo the fix. If I look over here, there's a huge dip over here. And that would just look weird if we go here and we increase the tiling to 2. You would have to like color this like black abyss or something, kind of like there's nothing under it. And I noticed that it was because I changed this guy. And I noticed it was happening here. These pixels here were merging. So this, we set this to 180. And then it was breaking my flood fill here. So if I took this guy and I changed it to 0, it would fix it. But I don't believe that using the wrong angle should break your procedural material, right? Like that's just like it shouldn't work that way. You shouldn't have to like, oh, I'm 1 degree off, therefore everything breaks. So to fix this procedurally, what I'm gonna do, yeah, because this is it's considering it one island. So the gradient is going from black over here to the bottom left corner to white all the way at the bottom or top right corner, where ideally it should be down here should be black and up here should be white, not all the way down there. So when I made this multi-directional warp grayscale, I noticed that I was using min, and when I use the min mode, it's supposed to cut into the white island. But for some reason, it was going outward, and it might be going outward because of the warp angle that I'm choosing. So I probably shouldn't use multi-directional warp grayscale. I should probably be using like slope blur or something else. But you know, these are all warp nodes, and again, I don't think if you use the wrong warp mode, it shouldn't break everything. So what I should have done is create a blend here, change it to multiply, because I wanted the warping, right, to only go inward. See, like here, these are the initial bounds, and then you can see that it's cutting inside. That's what I want. I don't want that to go outward, which I think does happen in some areas, which is why we have this issue here of them. See, like this should not extend out into this guy because I'm using min. That's what max is for. Max is supposed to push outward. So to fix that, I'm gonna take the result of the multi-directional warp grayscale, put it in the foreground. I guess it doesn't really matter because we're gonna be using multiply, but this mask, the nice clean cut one, is gonna go into the blend, and then we're gonna multiply. That way, so now if we plug this guy in here, that should be fixed. So we need to do that for this guy as well, because this guy might also be doing that where it's like warping outward. So this guy in here, this guy in here, and then this guy in here. And then we're just going to grab all of this and move it back. Okay, so then we're going to grab this guy and put it over here. Like that. Okay. This should be easier to read. So then, instead of the multi-directional warp grayscale feeding into this guy, it's going to be this guy. And then I noticed that we do have some gradients here. So actually, I'm just gonna make this scan come after this guy. So this is gonna go here, and then this is gonna go like that. All right, all our stuff looks okay. Okay, good. Sorry about that. But yeah, I think this should be better, more controlled. Okay, so where did we leave off? Here, right? Okay, yeah, because I noticed that this should be only the metal, and I noticed there was there was some white over here, and that's what led me to go down that rabbit hole. Anyways, let's continue. Okay, um, so now that we have the plates done, and then this mask, which we end up using over here, let's continue. All right, so now that we did the plate imprint and the plates, now we're going to do the imprint for the nails. And my playlist stopped, so let me continue that. Okay. Okay, so now we're doing the imprint for the nails. So now this one, you can see here, it's a little bigger, but it's pretty simple, just the repetitive stuff. We're going to start with a polygon 2. 4 sides, obviously. I did give it a bit of a curve. You can see here, because I wanted to make it a little more, stylized, a little bit more interesting. So I did give it a slight curve. I might even increase it. And then a gradient. So then you can see here, because I wanted to kind of, because it's been like, I would assume like hammered, so it would have flattened the top. So then we have a scan to get the bounds of it, 1, 1. This could be 0, doesn't matter. And then we blur it, and then we make it tiny. And you could have just made it tiny here, but sometimes that's the way she goes. This weird value that I'm gonna just round for you guys. 875. There we go. Okay. So yeah, there you go. And then what I did, actually, let me change this back. So what I did was I started with 1 in the center, and then I rotated it, and I moved it. You can see the values there. Now, this part you don't have to follow 1-to-1 because it might just be a lot of like number inputting, or you can if you want. But basically, what I did was I took this guy, and then which one's this guy? Let's see. Okay, so this guy up here, or down here. Because what I did is I placed 8 of these. So you see, if we look over here, focus on this top left quadrant. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So there's 8 per quadrant, and there's 4 quadrants. So 8 times 4 equals what? 32. So we have 32 of these. Now, obviously, I ain't rotating 32 nails. Okay, I'm gonna do 8. So what I did was which one was this again? Oh yeah, bottom. So I placed one over here. So I rotated it randomly, and then I moved it over there like that. I put it there. Then I did it again with this guy, and I put it over there. And then I did another one. And I'll show you the values in case you want to match them. And then I did another one. And then another one. And then another one. Now I did do another 6, but I ended up not keeping them because I added another 6 or 4. Oh, 4. Sorry. But I realized after that, I don't know why I did that, because in my reference, these inner ones don't have nails. But if you do want nails there, you can just, add them yourself but I'll show you anyways. So let me bring these guys in. Let me show you what it looks like if I... Probably too spiky as well, so I got rid of them. Because also the plate, the middle plate is what's holding those guys down. But anyways. This guy, boom. This guy. Then this guy. Then this guy. Okay. So basically what all these are is just adding them together into one final one. So I started from the bottom, added these two, add, then this guy's, then these guys, two, 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 and then I added this blend and this blend together to create this blend, and then this blend with this blend. Well, I left them out because they were extras. But basically, you just add linear dodge all your screws, or not screws, why do I keep saying screws? Your nails together. So then you have this. So now that I have this, oh, I could have just done a tile generator. But what I did was I did what I did with the planks earlier. I created transform 2D and then I rotated it 90 degrees. And then I filled my quadrants up that way. So this one, you can see it there. You can see it there. You can see it there. I just rotate it so that I have all four, and then I added them again. So these two got added together, and then these two got added with this one to make this thing, and then these three quadrants were added with the original to create all four. And then these guys were all subtracted by 0.05 to again create an imprint for the nails. Otherwise it would look like this. And it looks kind of flat, right? And this is just a little bit more detail to make it sell the illusion that these nails were hammered in. Okay, so that's it for the nails imprint. Now we're going to go back to the original polygon 2 that we made. And actually, I'm going to exaggerate the curve a little bit more. There you go. That looks a little cooler. Okay, so we're going to take the polygon 2 and we are going to create a highway for it. And then we're going to feed it into a multi-directional warp grayscale again with a Perlin noise using min mode. And then that is going to warp the nail a little bit like that. And then from the Perlin noise, we're going to do transform 2D. We're going to increase the tiling by 2. And then we're going to blend it. We're going to multiply it by 0.3 to create some imperfections on the surface. So you can see, so it's like been hammered, right? So some imperfections from the hitting. And I'm going to auto level it to bring back all the full range. And then I'm going to scale it down by that same weird value from earlier. So I'm just going to round this up again. Okay, and then same process. All right, so I'm just going to go through this quickly. Boom. Wait. You should just be able to copy paste, I think, because they should be sitting in the same spot. So let's check. This is the imprint stuff, and then this is the other one. Yeah, those are the same values. Yeah, okay. So yeah, so just actually you can just take all of this right here. Actually, take all of this. Take all of this, copy, paste it like that. And then all you have to do is just plug in these two guys. And that's it. And then it'll do all of this. And if something breaks, yell at me in the comments and I'll look at it. But I'm pretty sure that should work because it's basically the same thing, except it's a different, input. Okay, so once we have this, this is going to feed directly into a multiply. Just, okay, yeah, okay. So plug it into a blend mode and to multiply to 0.25. And I'm going to take a little detour. So from this guy, before the multiply, we're going to feed it into a histogram scan, and we're going to do a position of 1 to get the full bounds of the nail. And then from here, we're going to pull down into a flood fill because I want to have the nails at different elevations. Like some were hit harder with a hammer than others. Again, just another small detail that we have to go down a whole nother rabbit hole. So flood fill, the scan, random grayscale, histogram range. Otherwise, these guys are going to be super hammered deep compared to this guy. So I use a histogram range to kind of lower the range between the two. And then I use a multiply here with the original mask because I want to get rid of this in between gray value here. So then we go from this to this. That's why we need to multiply, otherwise we'll be working with this and then we'll be working with this gray stuff, which we don't want. Which I guess it could have been okay because then we could have used this guy as a mask in the opacity, but to avoid that I just masked it out here. And then this is going to go into the foreground of that multiply that we did just a bit ago. So then we have variation on our nails. So you can see this one's actually going further down. And then that is going to go here into an add linear dodge with 0.2. And boom. That's that. All right, we're almost done. We just have this little bit more to go here. And then we'll just let's do this guy because I think we skipped this guy. But after the metal mask here, after the scan, background, add linear dodge, and then we're gonna follow this guy. Oh, that's for this guy over here. So take this this thing that we did earlier. Do the invert grayscale, and then take that, and then that's gonna feed into the top because we want to get a black and white mask of all the metal pieces. So the plates and the nails. So that's what this is. Then we add them together, so then we have this, where it's just black and white. There's no gradients. Well, there's a little bit, but that's whatever. Okay. And then this is used for later, for base color and metallic. Okay. So then once we added our nails, now we're going to do these scratch marks, because in World of Warcraft, in this dungeon, there's like these werewolves called Worgen, and they scratch the floor, basically, because they have these big claws, and that's what these guys are here. So I wanted to add that detail. So to do that, actually let's turn it on. It's a very cool detail. Started with a shape. I beveled it to give it, like the nail. So it's not just like a flat, right? We want to bevel it. Then what I did was I did a transform 2D and I moved it off to the left and I made it a little bit smaller. You can see here the values. And then I mirrored it because I wanted to have 3, because in the reference there are 3 scratch marks. So I guess I only have 3 fingers. So then I created a left and then I mirrored it to create a right, and then I added the left and the right with the middle to do this, and I wanted to have the middle one be longer than the sides. So then I added them together here with an add linear dodge, and then I used a slope blur grayscale with a Perlin noise to get this. So we just made the monster logo, the energy drink. And then directional warp here towards the left using a purling noise. So we go, so these is like a perfectly up and down straight scratch. I wanted to give it a bit of a bend to the left here. And then I did another directional warp. And then I gave it a more noticeable bend to the right using this paraboloid shape. And then if I move this, just to show you what happens. If I move this, if I move my paraboloid, well, actually, you also want to get rid of the tiling. You can influence the scratches, right? So that's why I used that to kind of give it this like curve, right? Like they're scratching. So then I have two versions. I have this one, which is a little straighter, but bent to the left, and then I have a more curved bent to the right. And then I used a tile generator, and I did 3x3. And I have two inputs, because obviously I have two versions. Then I have scale 0.85, a little bit of scale random, so some scratch marks are bigger than others. Offset, this should be 0.5. We'll leave it at 1. I like where they landed, because there are some that are mixed. Position random and X, or Y and X, 1, 1. Rotation random, 1 all the way. Luminance random. Some scratches are going to be deeper than other scratches, so I did 0.25. And then by default, the blending mode is probably set to add, which we don't want because it's adding the scratch marks and creating this like flat area because it's reaching the maximum white value or it's hitting 1. So let's find this. Where is this located? So it should be, oh, I move it. Okay, so it should be over here. Okay, so if we go back, so it creates this because it's adding, right? So it's hitting the maximum value. So if we go back down there to blending mode, change this to max. And it's going to do this, which is going to look a lot nicer. And I don't think this one is what we want either. Yeah. So the only choice we have left is max. So it's like one scratched and the other one went over. Okay, and then I move it because I wanted to find a good spot for the scratches. I wanted them to be like evenly distributed. Otherwise it would have looked like, it's actually not bad, but I ended up moving them. Okay, now if we disable this and this, my scratches don't care about anything if I get rid of these two things. So if we look here, it's scratching the metal and the wood alike, and it's cutting all the way in between. Now, like we've done in previous tutorials with scratches, we don't want scratches running over gaps, right? Like it's cutting, I don't want to go over to this because we go over this a lot in my other videos, but we don't want the scratch going down or, yeah, down and back up because it's not how scratches work for the most part, right? Unless you manually do that. So with this first one, or well, this one's for the metal. Well, what is this one for? Yeah, this is one for the metal. Well, these are both for the metal, but basically, this makes it so that, first of all, it doesn't cut very deep on the metal, or as deep as it does for the wood, because obviously it's metal. So I wanted to still show that it was like, that these werewolves were so strong that it was cutting the metal, but not so strong that it was just like completely destroying it. So I have these two masks here to have it affect a little bit of the metal, but not all of it. And then with this one, I also have it so that the scratch doesn't go into the crevices but it still continues from one plane to the other, right? So it would leave like this gap. So that's what we're going to do now. So we're going to start with this first section here. And what I did was, so from this guy, which is just the nails, I'm going to follow it. So it's going to go down, and it's going to feed into a non-uniform blur grayscale. So we're going from this to this, and then that's going to go into histogram scan. So now what is happening here is, like I said, I want it to affect the metal, but I don't want it to affect all of the metal. So where there's a gradient, this is where the scratch mark is going to start fading. And where it's white, it's where there's going to be no scratch mark. And that's how we get. Wait a second. Yeah, so this is where it. Wait a second. Yeah, so you can see here it's cutting less of it. But these two are working together. So we kind of need both of them on. So then we have a levels here. Set to 0.45. And that's going into an add linear dodge here. And you can see here that I also do the same thing for this big guy here. Oh, well, that's why it wasn't working, because I should have been looking at these guys. Yeah, see? So this is like cleanly cutting through. And then here it's like, okay, hold up. Don't cut so much because it's metal. And then for this top guy here, we need to pull from this guy. Wait, is it that guy? Yeah, it is. Okay. And then from that guy, we're going to do another non-uniform blur grayscale. And even though it's pulling from this, because I'm using a non-uniform blur grayscale, it's blurring it, but these guys are so small that it's getting blurred out. Because it's technically there, you can see it, but it's getting blurred out. So that's why I have two, one for the nails and one for these guys, because it was getting blurred out. So you can see the settings there. Make sure your samples and blades are up. Then we add them together. And then that goes over here and it's subtracted. So you can see where there is an effect, we do subtract some of it. And then for the last part, we're almost done. We have an invert grayscale here, and this is coming from, I don't think we ever made this, but this is where we added both bevels together. So from this guy, from this blend mode, from the max lighten of the two bevels together, we're going to pull down into an invert grayscale, into a histogram scan, into a slight blur, into another invert grayscale. I probably don't need this one then, but we're going to leave it. And then it's going to give us this. And then following that is going to go into another invert grayscale. I'm not going to question it now. Okay, we're at the end. I don't want to go down rabbit holes. It's already pretty long. Then another blur, jeez, into a levels with the level in mids and change to 0.45. And then that's going to be subtracted from the result from here. And that's how we create the gaps. So these are the gaps between the planks. It's a gradient, so it falls off. And this is how we're doing this. So we subtract that. And then we have a levels here where I play around with the depth. So if I turn this off, this is what it would look like. But with this levels, with the level in mid, change to 0.425. we get bigger scratches, and then we invert it, and then we use min darken, not subtract. Um, min darken's set to 0.2. I'm not gonna explain why min darken, or I'm not gonna spend too much time, but the reason why min darken is because I didn't want um, the surface detail to show up in the scratches. Because if you just do a normal subtract, it's gonna look okay because the scratch mark is gonna still be there, but it's going to keep this surface noise on here. But by doing min darken, it like carves it out, and you only see this, um, which is what we want. We don't want the surface noise being in there because it got carved out. Okay, that's like the simple explanation. And then 0.2, and I think that's it for height, guys. We did it. And then that just feeds into a levels here that's default just to hold it down for us into the outputs. Otherwise, it would look like this, which we don't want. I should have mentioned this too. Normal, we're using 10 for normal intensity. I'm working with DirectX. And then ambient occlusion here, 0.025 is what I'm working with. I think by default it's set to 0.1. So yeah, it would look like that. Hopefully that didn't throw you off too much. You guys should know by now that you should be playing around with your normals here. Anyways, that was a lot longer than I expected, but hopefully you guys learned a lot. I'm gonna worry about this after the video. Oh, this is the copy paste that I did that I thought I undid. Alright, you guys don't have to stay around for that. But I also noticed that we reached 101 subscribers, so thank you everybody. Subscribers and non-subscribers. I'm not doing this for the subs, but it's cool to see that people like and are getting something from my tutorials. So thank you everybody for the support, for the comments, for the likes, all that YouTube meta stuff. But as always, thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next part for base color.